Welcome GRD 121 W1 Fall 2020 to our second exercise, our second hands-on exercise. This will be called WCCC Logo, and we'll be making a WCCC logo. We'll be converting it from raster to vector using Gravit. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Document and Resources. Now you'll have notes here. They're not here yet because this is the first time I'm doing it with Gravit, so I don't have the notes done. I'm going to record the video first and then do the notes. It'll look something like that, except it'll be for exercise 2. Now if I go to Bookmarks and I want to go to Gravit, I could click here, go to Gravit Designer, and if you're already logged in one time, it should go there again. You shouldn't have to log in every time you go there. The cache should remember that your account, so it may take a little bit and then log into your account. You'll know right away because it'll say create. And there it is. And what we'll do this time is we're going to use a paper size again. And this time we'll make it landscape because we're going to make kind of a landscape type logo. So we'll go down to US letter landscape 11 by 8.5 and we'll choose that. And now we have a sheet of paper kind of on its side. And we're going to trace over a logo, a raster logo. Now, where are we going to find a logo of Warren County Community College? Well, we'll go here and we'll just look for warren.edu. And we're going to go to the website. And there's a logo up here. Now, I have to tell you, this is not the actual logo because the font's different. But we're just going to use this for now because it's easy to get. And what I'll do is I'll right-click on it. And I'll say Copy Image. And I'll go back to Gravit. And even though you can do edit paste and all that and right click paste, I would recommend doing either Control V if you're on Windows or Command V, because I had some problems trying to do edit paste. So if I just do Command V on Mac, it seems to paste it just fine. And that should work on Windows too. So just use your shortcut Control V to do that. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to drag on the corner. Always hold Shift when you drag on a corner because you don't want to do this. You don't want to distort it. I don't want to see a logo that looks like that. So if you do that, undo, do Control Z on Windows or Command Z on Mac, and make sure you hold Shift, hold your Shift key, and then drag on a corner, and I'll just fill up the page nicely like that, and I'll just put it in the middle of the page. Keep it in proportion. This should look round. It's not an oval, anything like that. And you can see over here in my layers, it's called Image. Now if you want to change that, you can double-click right on Image, and I'll just call it WCCC, and I'll call it Web Logo just to start. So I know that's the original web logo. And then I can lock it. I can go over here, hover over this little lock, and lock it. Because I'm not going to do anything to it. We're going to be tracing over it. In fact, actually, before I lock it, I should mention one thing here. Before I lock it, I could click on it and turn down the opacity. I'm going to turn down the opacity because when we trace it, it'll be easier to see our lines and fills and things like that. So I'm going to take this down to around 50%. Doesn't matter how much it is, just so it's kind of grayed out. And then you can go lock it. Then we could leave it alone and we're going to be tracing over this. And it's not hard. We're going to be making a circle and putting some W's, and then we're just going to trace over the text. It won't be perfect, but it'll be close. And one thing I just want to point out, if you see any like help things, if you click on any of those help things, they show a black theme, and maybe you like working in a black theme. I'm going to leave it in a white theme for now, just because I'm used to doing that. But if you ever want to change this, it's just a weird thing. Let me just show you. If you go to Edit Settings, and now it looks okay, but sometimes if you go in here, it won't fit, and you won't be able to scroll, and you'll have to do like a Shift Command plus or minus, and actually that's why it's actually fitting. So if it comes in like this, you can't get to save settings, and you can't cancel it, and you can't use any shortcuts. It's really weird, and you can't use Command plus or minus or Control plus or minus because that's the setting that zooms in and out of your software. So it doesn't work here and it doesn't scroll. It's really weird. So you have to add Shift. If you're on Windows, do Shift and then do Shift Control minus and zoom out. But on a Mac, I'm going to do Shift Command minus and zoom out. And then I could go here and do Save Settings. And you might be like, well, what are you talking about? Well, if I go to Theme here, if I want a dark theme, I could do Save Settings or Save Changes. Now I have this dark theme. Now I'm not going to stay in this dark theme. You can work in this dark theme. But if I want to go back, I'll just go back to Edit Settings, and I'll just put it back to the light theme, which is default. I'll save my changes, and then I'll just put my browser zoom back at 100%, which where it was. Although you could go down a little bit. It might give you a little more space as you're working. So maybe I'll go down to like 90%. That's my browser, not this. Because remember, this is Control or Command zooming in or out of the artwork like this. But if you want to do the browser, how you would normally do it in Chrome, you have to add Shift to it and do Shift Command plus or minus. So just pointing that out if you want to work in the dark theme. We have our artwork in there. We're going to trace over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in using Command or Control plus. And I'll just zoom into that. Now if it's off your screen, hold your space bar and use that and move it over a little bit. So I just want this in the middle here, and we're just going to put a circle over top. That'll be nice and easy to do. And actually at this point I should save it. So, and I'll hit no. And what I'll do now is I'll do File, Save to Cloud As. And you can see I did some practice ones here. And I'm just going to call it 2-WCCC logo. That's all you got to do. Just 2-WCCC logo. We don't have to put Gravit in there. I think that'll be fine. And then I'll just hit save. There it is. Now it's saved, it's syncing. And I'm going to draw a circle over it. So I could go to my shapes here. This is my shape tool. And I'll use ellipse. And you could just kind of draw a circle over top. Now it'll be gray. Now if you don't want a fill, you could just go here and I think trash your fill. Although it might need a stroke. Let me just see what happens here if you try to trash your fill. Oh no, it still does it. So we actually don't have any stroke on here, although we'll want to put one. You might want to put a little black stroke, although we can see it right now. And we could see the blue line, that's the guide, but actually there's nothing. If you turned off your other layer, you wouldn't see anything. So I'm just going to resize it a little bit here. And it doesn't have to be the same size as mine. Mine's around 2 inches by 2 inches. And that's about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. If it's not a perfect circle, it should be just very close, but we're just kind of approximating the artwork as much as we can. So there's my circle there. Now we're not going to make it red because we're going to put stuff over top of it. But even over here we can name it, and I'll just call it red circle. So we're done with that. That was pretty easy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work on a W. Now there's different ways we could do this. We could use the pen tool and trace this. What I'm going to try is using the W text and putting a W over here because that's the way it was originally created. And then we're going to kind of group it and spin it around and do things like that. So that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to use my text tool because we haven't used that yet. And I'll click on here and I'll just click. That's all you got to do is click once. And I'll just capital W. Now if you click off it, it'll be highlighted like that in a box. Now keep in mind, unlike Illustrator, when you make text like that, you can scale it. This does not scale. It's almost like a text box. So we're going to have to do something else to be able to scale it. It doesn't mean you can't make it bigger. You could change the point size over here. I could go up here and make it a lot bigger. And now I got to make the box bigger. And what I'll do is just use this Open Sans font. If you see this Open Sans font, just leave it there for now. We'll just use that. That'll be easy. And I'm just going to make it extra bold. And there it is. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. And I could move it down here and try to place it over here. That's what we're going to do. And I'll zoom in a little bit more. And I'll use my space bar. Now, in order to start stretching it and moving it around, what I want to do is treat it like an object. So what we could do is we can convert this text to a shape, to an object. And it's called convert to paths. And you could do that in Illustrator too. So it'll no longer be a font. You won't see it as Open Sans extra bold. So it has to be Open Sans extra bold first. But now what we're going to do is convert it to paths. There's two ways. This is the icon right here, convert to path. I could also go to modify, path, convert to path. And either one will be fine. And there it is. Now, it still has a fill right now. If you wanted to take away the fill, you can, because it's no longer text. I don't think you could take away the fill on a text, but you could take away fill of a shape like this. So I'm going to take it away and hit the little trash can on the fill. And there's my W, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And there it is. Now, if you want to put a stroke on it, if you think it's a little hard to see, you can put a stroke on it. And if you click off it, you won't be able to see it, so that's an issue too. So you could add a border here. Now one point's too thick, so you can actually double click in here, and I'll make it like 0.25. We'll see if that works. And there's a nice thin, very thin black border. It went to 0.3, and that's fine. And then I could kind of move this thing around a little bit, and I could scale it. Now I can drag on this thing and stretch it out, and stretch this down a little bit, just like that. And that's all I'm going to do. I was going to have you mess around with the anchor points and stuff like that, but I think for now, I think we'll just do this. Because when you convert it to outlines, let me just show you this for a second. If you go into the sub-select tool, you'll see all these anchor points. And when we converted the font to a path, it put a lot of extra anchor points in here. Even more than you can't even see. If I go down here and I select this and I move it, there's even other ones. There's like anchor points on top of anchor points. And that's just because that's the way the font was built. So there's a lot of subtleties in here. So instead of deleting all these anchor points right now, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So we'll mess with anchor points in another exercise, but just for now, I'll leave it like this, and I don't have to use this sub-select tool. I'll just go back to my pointer. So we'll just kind of stretch it and manipulate it as best we can. Even though you could see here, there's a little extra space there, you know, that should really be up higher. Normally we would grab the anchor points and move them, but like I said, we'd have to delete anchor points. There's a whole bunch of anchor points to delete, and just to move faster here, I don't think I'm going to do that. So we'll just center this the best we can. So that's my W right there, and I just want to make sure that the bottom corners of this kind of come down to where that star shape starts. So that's what I'm going to do first. So there's my W, and it says path right now because we converted it to path. We could call it a W then if we want. If we just want to go here and make it a W, then at least we know it's one of the W's. Now I'm going to zoom out, and I'll do Command minus, and on Windows you could do Control minus to zoom out. And I'll just pan a little, hold my space bar and move it. Now what I want to do first is make a W down here that's the opposite of that. So one thing you can do is you could do Command D or Control D on Windows, and it makes a duplicate right on top of it. And make sure that the first thing you do is flip it. Use this thing, flip vertical, and then what I'm going to do is actually use my arrow key and move it down. And if it's taking slow, you could hold shift, it'll go faster. And I just want to move this down. I'm using my arrow, down arrow, and just moving it down. That way I know that it's directly, it didn't get moved side to side at all. And that's all I want to do, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, and maybe I'll bump it up a little bit so that the corners are right about there. And if you're not sure if they're aligned or not, I think you can select one and then hold shift and select the other one and use this align thing. Align center, and hopefully this won't align it to the page, this will align it to each other. Yeah, that's fine. So that it didn't move, so that means they're aligned to each other. And since we're going to have almost a duplicate going sideways, what we could do is we could group this together so they don't move anymore. So if you get these lined up nice, and don't worry about the color yet, but if they're lined up nice, let's group them. And there's an icon here called Group Items, and if you're not sure where that is, it's Modify Group Selection. So we have two things selected. So remember, to select something, you select one, and then you hold your shift key and you select the other. And you have to get right on the edge. If there's no fill on it, select one, hold shift, and then select the other, but make sure you're on the edge of it because there's no fill, so it doesn't know what you're touching in the inside of it. So now they're selected, and I'm going to go group. There it is. Now it's called grouped now. Now I'll just leave it as a group name right now. Now you can tell what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip these sideways and make a copy. So I can do Command D again, and that made a copy. There it is. There's group, there's a second group, and right away we're not going to flip it, we're going to rotate it. And it doesn't matter if we rotate it left or right. We're going to rotate it now. And there it is. And actually they stayed right on center. So that's exactly what we want. So that's not that hard to do. So we made one W, we converted it to paths, and then flipped another one around and made sure they were lined up, and then grouped them so they wouldn't get misaligned. And then we copied that group. So we have two groups here. And you know, you could name these. You could even call this W vert, and then go this one and call it W hors for horizontal. And that means they're the horizontal W's if I have the right ones here. And I messed them up. So I'll put V and I'll put H. So this is the horizontal one with the H. And when I click on this one, this is the vertical, WH, WV. So I have those now. I have those W's now. And I have my circle. And what we could do is color them. So I'll color these first. Now, if you go to color them, you're not going to see fill because they're a group. But what you can do is you could just hover over one. If you hover over it, it'll go in the group. Just hover your mouse over that and then go here. Now it has a border. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the fill and add a fill. If there's no fill, you have to add it. And I'll just make it white. And I'll click off so that goes away. And then I'll click on this again. And again, if it's getting both, click off and hover over just that one. Like click a second time. I guess that's the way it works. If you click on the group and then click again, it'll get something within the group. So then if you click in there, and it works like that in Illustrator too, you double click and it keeps embedding into the group and you see little tabs here when you're in Illustrator. But I'm on that W now and I'll delete the stroke. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to delete the stroke. I could delete the stroke first, and then I'll give it a fill with the plus sign, and just make sure it's white. I'm just using the white over here. And then same thing here. Click once, click a second time, delete the border with the trash can, add a fill with the plus sign, and make it white. And then same thing over here. If I could click on that one, get rid of the border, add a fill, make it white. And we still have two groups here, so there's my groups. I could close them up if I want to. And I could have done this too. I could have gone in here and selected each one that way. I didn't even point that out when I was doing it, but I could have selected these that way to go and change their fill. That's another way that allows you to get inside the group of these. Now, I could have left the name group there so you know it's a group, but you can see it has a little group icon here, so that's indicating that it's a group. So we have our W's. Now, if we want to change our red circle, you could click here to select the red circle if it's hard to see, and I'm going to give it a fill color, and it doesn't have one, so I have to add it, and I'm going to make it red, and I'm going to, actually, I'll use this red, and it says 98, and I'm just going to change it to be AA. They're using hex color here. I'm not sure what the RGB value is actually, so I'm just going to use AA0000. That's a hex number, and then after I put that in, I'll just hit enter. And it's a little bit brighter than the one that's down here, even though I like the burgundy color. So there's our logo. That doesn't look too bad of what we made. I'll zoom out a little bit, and I'll move over, and I'm just going to make this line here. Instead of making a stroke that I have to worry about the thickness, I think what I'm going to do is just use a rectangle and just draw a shape here, very thin, and then when I scale it, I won't have any issue scaling it, worrying about the stroke thickness or anything like that. So I'm just going to make that. Now it's red right now, so I'm going to make sure it's black. And there's my black line. And I'll zoom out a little bit. And instead of calling it rectangle, I'll just call it black line. So I'm identifying everything over here so I know what they are. It'll just be easier later. It takes more work to do that, but it's helpful to go through here than just having a bunch of layers that say path, you know, and stuff like that, and rectangle. That way I kind of know where the red circle is. So if I want to turn that off, I could turn off the red circle and turn off the line and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here because we're going to do this part next, and I don't want the video to get too long. So I'll do this in two parts. So I'll save this. I'll make sure I'll click on this little thing. I always forget to do this. I'll click on this and save everything I have so far. And again, so far we just used a circle, a W text that was converted into paths. We did some transformations by flipping these around, and we even aligned them. And then we made copies and we rotated them. So we flipped, we rotated, we did a bunch of transformations here, in addition to some scaling early on. And then what we'll do is we'll just put some text over here, and we'll make sure that we have a vector logo that works on white paper and a vector logo that works on darker shade of paper or over top a photograph or anything like that. So they don't have to be in like a black box or anything like that. So that's what we're going to do in part 2. So stay tuned for the next part of this to finish this up.